There was nothing on the market good enough, punchy enough to get my consultants billing quickly in tough markets. Nothing that engaged my consultants, keeping them hungry for deals. Nothing that kept them sharp. See, no one was as good at training my people as I was. But this took a lot of my time. What was available for my senior consultants? How could I maximize their revenue? There was nothing on the market that truly made my people feel invested in, that I would be comfortable putting them in front of. So we made it. Find out why people are joining the RecWire Plus recruitment platform. Link in the show notes. Back to the show.
All right, welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. Today with Dan Martin from the Ripple Project. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you, mate. Very well. Halfway through the week. See the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah. No, it's all good. I'm just off the jiu-jitsu mats, as I was saying to you before. Keeping the old body grinding. We have a bunch of 40-year-olds in here during the day, slipping off from work or doing shift work or however it works.
Yeah.
So yeah, the office doubles up as a jiu-jitsu gym in the evening. So it's been a good start to the afternoon, and we're doing this, another podcast, and then going to view a new property in La Alcadesa, which is a beach town just outside of Gibraltar.
Lovely, lovely. So you're flying out there today, or is this like
No,
a
well,
remote
I'm
thing?
based in Gibraltar, so
Oh, I didn't realize. Oh,
yeah, based
okay.
in Gibraltar for the last 3 years,
Got
and
it.
yeah, I'll just be dipping in and out across the border,
Yeah.
get a bit more space, a bit more bang for your buck on the Spanish side, and
Yeah,
then
nice.
everything else is held here. Kids are here, all the rest. So
Got
yeah,
it.
all
Yeah,
good.
nice.
So Dan, tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about yourself, your mission, and what you're looking to achieve from it.
Yeah, sure. So I'll share my current mission this year for at least 2025 and hopefully beyond. And then I guess I'll explain how I arrived at that being my mission. So this year, the goal that I've set myself is to work with 100 leaders of businesses. And that will lead to what I call a ripple effect of many, many more. And the reason I arrived at that figure is because I zoomed out at the back end of last year and asked myself, what, what, what's my purpose from an altruistic perspective and also a selfish perspective? So the altruistic perspective being, what difference do I want to make to the world? And the ultimate aim within that is to help people feel like they actually enjoy the work that they do. Because over the last few years, 3 years, been working with many professionals, most of them in recruitment businesses, primarily on helping them overcome addictions, but beyond that, become more productive, get more done in less time, and stop having that Sunday night anxiety that so many people feel. And the theme that I noticed there was that there are just so many people who are going through the motions really and working
Talk
out
to
of
me before we go into this. Talk to me about drinking drugs and recruitment. Give
yeah,
me how prevalent is it? Is it what we think?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I think it's slowly getting better, it definitely is. There is an alcohol-free movement that is gradually picking up momentum, which is great, but historically recruitment has always been a bit of a hot pot for destructive behaviors. And 80% of the people that I've worked with throughout my entire career have been in recruitment at various different levels, some of them quite junior, all the way up to founders and leaders of businesses. And the most common addictions that I see are alcohol and cocaine because it's that like glamour of lifestyle, right? And when I was in that world, it was almost encouraged in a way,
really?
you'd be like incentivized with first day, what they call them, Thirsty Thursday. So you go out and get pissed up, and there'd always be someone who would call in a care package in the form of a bag of cocaine. So
Really?
it's kind of systemic inside the culture. Um,
Well, is this, sorry, just for anybody listening, this is London we're talking about, is it?
Yeah, that was where I was working. Yeah, yeah. The worst I saw it was when I was working in the umbrella industry, like how helping out contract consultants.
Yeah.
And in that world, the it's not the official job description, but unofficial job description for like a BDM or an account manager through an umbrella company is Your job is to go and form relationships with recruitment consultants so that they like you enough to refer their contractors to you. The best way to do that is to take this company credit card and take them out for a drink and a nice meal and butter them up a little bit. And in that environment, again, it's like, well, there's always going to be someone who wants to get a bag of Coke, and it just spirals from there. So
Oh,
it's a weird kind of underground world, you know?
do you know, like I spent a large part of my formalized recruitment career in Australia,
Uh,
and there was a boozy culture,
yeah.
um, but I don't know, like there was definitely no cocaine flying around, or
Yeah.
if there was, it wasn't handed to me.
Yeah.
Um, so it just didn't feel like that was part of the culture.
Yeah.
I think maybe they were a little bit ahead on the physical fitness, the sun shines,
For
people are a bit
sure.
more body conscious, all of that.
Mm.
And apparently cocaine is like super expensive there
I've heard
compared to,
that. I've heard that, and it's very hard to
yeah.
get. I know that there's a big like heroin and crystal meth problem in Australia, but it's going to be very hard to hold down a target-driven job if you're shooting up heroin, a
Yeah.
few times a week. Whereas cocaine often falls into the category of like a high-functioning addict. A lot of the people which I was working with, they're not what you would typically picture as you hear the word addict. You think of like somebody who's lost all their money, they've got no home, they've got no job, their family's gone, and it's like absolute pits of despair. That is addiction for some people, but for others, it's high functioning, which is what it was like for me, where, it's successful on the surface, had a well-paying job, had a nice car and nice clothes, looked good. And on the inside, I was struggling because I was dependent on this bag of cocaine. So high functioning on the outside, struggling on the inside, and
What
it's
does
it's
that
hard
feel?
to
What does
speak
that feel
up.
like being dependent on it? Like, so you wake up, like you wake up in the morning, you know you've got loads of stuff to do. How
Yeah.
quickly do you hit that line? How quickly do you get back on it? Like what were you at your worst?
When was I at my worst?
Yeah.
Just before the lockdowns hit in 2019. That's when it all came to a head. And there was one moment, the Christmas over, not 2019, a year before that. Broke up with my girlfriend shortly before Christmas and agreed to go and see her on Christmas Day. And then I came back to my apartment at that point, having been told that there was no chance of us getting back together. And I had a bit of coke left over from Christmas Eve, and I started sniffing it on my own. And that's when I had to look in the mirror and go, "Hang on a minute, this ain't fun anymore." Because it's
Yeah.
often glamorized as this thing where you go out with your mates, you get a couple of bags in, you have a good time, you have a laugh, you chat someone up or whatever. But when it's just you and you're listening to music, sniffing coke on your own off the desk that you work from, that's when it's like, okay, we've crossed past the point of it being enjoyable here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one, eh? I mean, anybody like I like a drink, and I've uh I've definitely channeled. Like I think it used to be more of a release thing for me, whereas
mm,
now, like with jiu-jitsu, I do that during the week, and I'll
yeah,
have a glass of wine, like depending on my situation or whatever else, or maybe on a Friday I might go a wee bit further. Once
mm,
a quarter, I like a blowout.
mm-hmm,
Like to go somewhere, like get the cobwebs off and stuff. But I find that the martial arts and the gym kind
mm,
of keep me like stable enough that I know that if I if I do take it too far during the week, I have to hit the mats the next day, and the guys are going to sense weakness and murder me.
yeah,
And I don't need that, So it
no,
keeps me kind of honest, and finding other addictions has been maybe something that I've learned, like positive addictions to do. That's
yeah,
probably something I've learned as I've got older. But
yeah,
it's tough getting those little whispers, that little devil on your shoulder saying,
for
you,
sure.
you deserve a nice pint of Guinness and a packet of peanuts.
Yeah,
Like, don't hold back. Hold back. That'll increase the third. Then, sure, if you just have three, you're
yeah,
all good. No
yeah,
problem. Don't tip to four and five because then we're in fun time, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then if we're over that, forget about it.
yeah, yeah. Or like alcohol isn't inherently bad, right? And you can maybe for a warped lens say that cocaine isn't inherently bad, although there's little evidence to suggest that it's a good thing to have in your life. But
Yeah, right.
as is the case with most behaviors, it's about the relationship that you have with the thing as opposed to the thing itself. There
Mm,
are, I'm sure, some people in England and around the world who maybe sniff coke once, twice a year. Is that an issue? Depends who you're asking. It's not a binary good bad in many people's case. It's about that leash that it has over people. And like you're saying, if you want to have a pint of Guinness a couple of times a week and it hasn't got that emotional pull over you, then
Yeah.
I'd argue that it's not a problem. And this is an interesting point because it's what I found quite difficult in the addiction community, hence why I'm slowly moved away from it and distanced myself from it. Is where the traditional narrative on addiction is that as far as like Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step community, which is what we know to be associated with addiction, is concerned, is they say that in order to overcome any form of addiction, you have to admit that you're powerless to it. And I just think that's total bullshit because
Yeah.
how can you surrender? You can't give power to an inanimate object like a bottle of alcohol or a bag of cocaine. The only power which it has is that which you're giving to it. And I like really struggled with that idea because addiction isn't on off; it's a continuum. You know,
Yeah.
you could, like I wasn't using cocaine or drinking every day, maybe drinking and sniffing coke 3, 4 times a week. But for me, relatively, that was too much because it was having an impact on my relationships, the amount of money I had, my quality of work, my quality of life at large. So for me, that became an issue. But now, after going sober for 2 and 3/4 years or so, I arrived at a point where I was like, actually, I kind of fancy a drink and I'm gonna have one because I want to prove to myself that I'm no longer afraid of that past way of being. I've built up so much more value in my life now that I don't feel um I've not got enough skin in the game to fall back into that because I've got too much to lose kind of thing, you
Yeah.
know?
When I was younger, I used to enjoy it more too. Like,
Yeah.
so when I was younger, like let's say my 20s, if I had a few beers and you had a free rum, I'm away to the races. Like I'd love it.
Yeah.
Now, like I could have a couple and then be not fussed. Now there are the odd occasion, don't get me wrong, when I'm like, all right, all the stars have aligned. Let's go. But it doesn't have the same pull
Yeah.
that it once has. So maybe my relationship with alcohol has changed as I've got older. I don't know if there's a set in stone chemical imbalance for life. I don't know.
Chemical imbalance theory is what a lot of people associate with addiction and even depression to a degree, but it's not that simple, mate. I think as humans, we want closure on everything. We want to be able to say, yeah, that's definitely the answer. But when it comes to something like addiction or depression or anything that someone struggles with from a mental health perspective, there are so many different nuanced factors that need to be taken into consideration. And that whole chemical imbalance theory, in my opinion, if I can like put my tinfoil hat on and go conspiracy mode for a minute here, it was
Mm.
it was created in order to sell more drugs for big pharma. Because if you can just say, yeah, it's a chemical imbalance, but the good news is if you take this pill, we'll fix that balance.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
like there are so many of these like subtle little stories that have been gently implanted into society over time that we just kind of accept them to be true. But humans are so complex. Like we think we understand the mind, but we don't. There's so much we still don't understand about it. And to say that the reason you've got this problem is because you've got a chemical imbalance in your brain, it's just bullshit. It's just not. It don't work like that, you know.
I read somewhere that young people are taking more cocaine now than they did before, but drinking less.
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
especially in Ireland, like it's just available everywhere. And
Mm,
when I was growing up, that wasn't the case. But we were binge drinking,
mm,
like 90s, noughties. Well, I was 15 in the 90s, but like from then on, you know.
yeah.
Um, but I'm wondering in agency recruitment in London, how big a problem is cocaine?
It's hard to say because there's no one doing studies on this kind of stuff. But what a study that would be to read. I'd be
Right.
fascinated to read that. Yeah, someone needs to do that. But
That's your job, right?
yeah, well, yeah, maybe someday. Maybe someday. But I do think it is a big problem. But it will change over time because the conversations that I think are taking place within all organizations, but especially in recruitment right now, is how can we create a more positive culture inside the organization and give people a little bit more meaning in the job that they do because the most common reasons that I saw within agency employees who were addicted to something were, one, because they had some form of trauma that was left unresolved and they just didn't want to go near it. That's at the root of many people's struggle with addiction. But then secondly, more about what's going on in the present day. So if they're working in an environment where they don't feel supported, they don't feel fulfilled, and they've got an enormous target over their head on a day-to-day basis, and they don't feel like they have enough ability to achieve that, then going out and getting fucked up a few times a week becomes really compelling, doesn't it? It becomes a really, really nice option, because why would they not? It's a nice form of escapism, you know? So
Yeah,
I think
maybe.
it will change over time as cultures get better and organizations realize, hang on a minute, we need to do more here to make this a more pleasant place to be, as opposed to just saying, how much money do you want to earn? It's gone, it's beyond that now. Like, people are
Do
crying out, I
you
think.
do you genuinely believe that in a target, given what we've seen in the last 2 years of shit recruitment,
Mm,
founders are sitting around the table going, how can we make this nicer for these fuckers that aren't making us any money? Like, that is not the conversation they're having.
mm,
They're sitting around and their internal and external monologue amongst each other is that person's not making money. They're not good enough. I could do this better
mm,
if I was there. I survived 2008. I survived the next recession. Like,
mm,
I think the softy, nicey stuff happens in a nice market. And
mm,
I see the chats change with the
mm,
marketplace. Like, you know, before in the last boom, which is after COVID,
mm,
when that ramp up happened, the monologue that we saw, and the dialogue that we saw from it was 4-day week, remote,
mm,
diversity and inclusion. Then as soon as things got tight again, it was get them back in the office, put the KPIs on, get rid of the dead wood, get
mm,
back on the phone. Like, the agency recruitment, the margins are so fine in growth mode that it's very hard to keep that consistency of niceness through throughout the highs and lows when you're taking your cost basis into account,
mm,
because at the end of the day we are that target driven. And I would
mm,
think now, coming out of that their last run, looking at the results of Page, Walters, Hayes, and all the rest, they all suffered.
mm,
If they suffered, you can be sure as that cookie crumbles downhill, other people have suffered too. Now, we are just on the precipice of going up again.
mm.
So, where do you see 6 months? Everybody's going to be talking about how nice they can be again and all the rest. I just, I've called me cynical, but I've seen it change too much. Like
I'm
when
not
you,
saying 6 months. I think 6 months is probably too short of a time. What I'm talking about is that the overall landscape of what um what change is required inside an organization, particularly a recruitment organization where you know that turnover of staff is like a major issue, and it's going to be because I think people will come into a business like that thinking that they can do it, and then they realize, hang on a minute, there's a lot more work that I need to do here, and maybe I'm not cut out for this. There's going to be that case, but markets are variable. Things do go up, things do go down, and what I think needs to happen, and I think will happen eventually, is that there needs to be more proactive support for those moments when things do get tough, as opposed to just saying you need to do more, which like it can work for some people, but it won't work for everyone. If you've got somebody who was performing, for example, and now they've stopped performing, and you're saying you just need to do more, instead of that, it needs to be, well, what's actually going on here, and how can we support you as an organization to get back to your top performance? Like, that's the kind of stuff that I think will happen. A more collaborative and supportive and growth oriented approach to personal development within an organization, as opposed to, well, they're not performing, we need to get them out and get someone else in, because it just kind of fuels that problem of retention, you know what I mean?
yeah, but you know, like a large part of these people, they'll tell you one thing, but
Mm,
they hire with the knowledge that 1 in 3 will survive.
mm,
And that means that two people are cannon fodder.
mm-hmm,
So they're playing people off each other for the one desk.
mm,
And they're running and it's within that 3 month period, that one person's going to shine, the other two are not, they
mm,
move on. And if it's a hot market, two or three of them might survive.
Mm,
and it's working out those metrics. Like I think the problem is really down to the corporate growth strategy that
mm,
that we imply, and we see it in Rec Direct. We
mm-hmm,
see it always. Just attitudes change.
mm,
Right, we're going to hire a batch now. We're doing it bang, and
mm,
I I don't know. There's a lot of short termism.
mm,
So, who is that person in the organization that does that welfare check? Is that
mm,
the building manager? Is that the director? Is that the owner? They
mm,
are they adding more cost and bringing somebody in from the outside? How far do
mm-hmm.
you go with it? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a difference, I think, between well-being and performance, right? There's a pretty big difference between well-being and performance, and I think we do live in a period of time where we are like addicted to performance at all costs.
Yeah,
No matter what, we have to perform, and that's that. Like, just hit the fucking phones and get shit done. You have to just hit your numbers, um, and the well-being check is a really, really interesting conversation because is there anything being done at a wider level outside of recruitment here, like well-being, as far as I can see, and there are exceptions to the rule here. Well-being is more of a tick box exercise than it is a general inquiry into compassion for your employees. And
yeah,
we see this within like the mental health first aid. Like, a lot of people won't like me saying this, but I think it's largely a waste of time for many people. And after having conversations with over 300 people over the last 3 years, working with them one to one, always ask them out of curiosity, like from a well-being perspective at work, how supported do you feel? And they say, well, we have mental health first aid training. And okay, what did that do for you? Did you get anything from that? And they go, no. It was an hour and a half in the morning where they just threw anxiety, depression, and stress at me, and it didn't make any difference to what I was doing. But from a corporate perspective, it looks great, doesn't it? Because you say, "Oh, we've got mental health first aiders here." You go,
yeah.
okay, what was that
So,
doing?
Dan, who come? Sorry, that dark day that you had. What was your genesis from there?
The what that I had? Sorry.
Your genesis. How did you reemerge from the ashes, if you like, and get
Ah,
yourself together and get to the point where you were helping other people?
yeah, lockdown. Honestly, lockdown was the best thing that ever happened to me. But in the long term, in the short term, it was fucking horrible because the lifestyle that I was living, which was going out, drinking, sniffing coke, whatever, that was no longer possible, right? Because everywhere was closed. I couldn't get drugs easily. I could buy alcohol, and I did drink a lot on my own for a good 6 months or so. But eventually, it got to a point where because I was no longer able to run away from all of the bullshit that I had been, like my difficult emotions, I just forced myself to sit with them and confront them. And over the course of a year and a half or so, recognized that the reason why I was operating so destructively was because I was avoiding a lot of unresolved trauma that I had from when I was a kid. So I was adopted at a young age and had a good life. Wouldn't be here now if I wasn't adopted by the people who I was. But when I was old enough to understand what adoption meant, I internalized this idea that, well, I'm just not good enough for my birth parents. And that idea that I'd internalized caused a lot of like guilt and shame and sadness and frustration and confusion and all sorts of emotions that I just didn't know how to deal with. So I just pushed them away, packaged them up, and cocaine and alcohol become a coping mechanism for that.
Wow.
So over that period of a year and a half or so in lockdown, that stuff all started to come up because I didn't have my crutch anymore. I didn't have my mechanism of avoidance, which was coke. So um, arrived at this place where I was on a call with one of my best mates at the time, and I was explaining to him how I was feeling, like really confused, didn't know what it was, and he was like, "I'm gonna be honest, mate. It sounds like you're depressed." I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that puts a lot into perspective." So surrendered to that idea with much resistance, and started going to therapy myself, which I was always like really resistant to. I thought, how can a conversation help me? I can figure it out on my own. All this like bullshit, macho, masculine stuff. And it transformed my life. Honestly, I worked with a hypnotherapist who helped me piece everything together and understand that the way I was feeling in the present isn't about the present. It's actually about things that have happened in the past, and that's creating the lens through which I view reality. So I started to heal all of those wounds that I had, and as I did that work, the cravings and the desire to go out and get fucked up just naturally went away. And I saw such a big transformation in myself that it felt like a no-brainer to me to go and train as a therapist because it had transformed me. So that's what I did. I trained as a cognitive hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, and got my qualifications. And then a friend of mine, the same friend who said, "You sound like you're depressed," he qualified as a therapist the year before me and launched a performance coaching business. And at the point in which I was qualifying, which was mid 2022, around that sort of time, he built his business up to a point where he could no longer take any more clients on. And he said, "Dan, I'm stretched. I need some help. If you can, I'd like to pass you a few coaching clients. Would you be up for it?" And I said, yeah. So I worked with him for a little while alongside my job selling software at that point. Um, Built up enough revenue to be able to leap away from the corporate world. And then when I took the leap in February 2023, I then
Mm.
went all in on my business as well. And that's when I launched my addiction business alongside working with some clients for him. So it was great because it gave me a little bit of security in having clients passed to me from him, which then allowed me to focus more on building my own business and bringing clients in
And
through
and
through
those
that.
clients are now gravitated your business to a lot of recruitment. Is it recruiters, recruitment founders, all levels? Like, could you break down what your normal customer base would be?
Yeah, so over the last year or so, I noticed that I was getting more leaders of businesses work with me. And as I said earlier, the vast, well, 80% of the people who I've worked with have been in recruitment. So um, it's typically founders, but I have worked with directors at various different levels. Could be sales, could be operations, could be marketing. There are no restrictions to that
Sure.
really. It could even be consultants at kind of team lead, senior level. But generally speaking, nowadays I am leaning more towards that leadership lens because what I found and the evolution from addiction to what I do now uh, was that I always thought that overcoming addiction was like the finish line because that's what it
Mm.
felt like for me. But then as I was working with more people who were leading teams, found that after we'd overcome whatever their addiction was, the conversation would naturally turn to work because that's where they spend more time than anywhere else. And
Yeah.
like everything would come out at that point where they're like, I just don't really feel that engaged. I don't really feel like I'm enjoying it that much. I'm kind of just working to get by and not really enjoying my life all that much. So that's how the evolution took place from addiction to what I do now.
And do you like take a holistic look at their life or just at their work or like what does a typical program of how you break somebody down and how you build them back up look like?
Well, you've heard of Simon Sinek, right? I presume you've seen his work. Yeah, you know one
Yeah.
of his books, Start with Why. It's that ultimately, once they've got their life to a place where they're no longer being pulled in all sorts of different directions by various different behaviors, it starts with them and it starts with their why. So why I started this podcast today with my why. There's an altruistic why and there's a selfish why. So with anyone who I work with, regardless of what their job title is, it has to start with them. And that why is so, so important because the vast majority of people are completely on autopilot. They're just going through life in order to get by because they've got bills to pay, they've got families to feed. I get all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have a compelling purpose on earth, then you are going through the motions and you're at risk of having what we've rebranded as a midlife crisis, which is really an identity crisis. That's what it is, but we've put this nice name on it, midlife crisis, an identity crisis, where you've been on autopilot for 20, 30 years, and then one day you wake up and go, what the fuck have I been doing? I don't want
Mm.
this. I don't want any of this. So then you fall into a depression, you rebuild yourself, and then you figure out, oh, okay, I'm going to go and be a magician now. Like it's something crazy like that. So the work that I do, in essence, is really helping people avoid that so that they don't wake up one day and go, fuck, I've wasted my life. It's where are you going?
Yeah.
Is that a direction you want to go? If
Yeah.
not, why are you going in that direction?
My ex-wife had one of those every 5 years.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that is your wife like quite ambitious and quite intentional about what she wants to do in her life?
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Hungry anyway, but
Yeah, well, the thing is, people who are high performers and like achievers, as I call them, I think we're naturally going through cycles anyway. There will be points of our life when we like let go of a past identity and we go, all right, I'm stepping into something new here. And that
Yeah.
means that there's going to be a bit of pain and a bit of turmoil because it's new, it's unfamiliar, it's uncertain, and I'm walking on thin ice a little bit. That's normal. But if you're having a major one of those where you go, I don't know who I am anymore,
Yeah.
that's when it's an issue, right? And that's
Yeah.
what people avoid.
Yeah, I've seen that all right.
Yeah.
It I'm I'm quite a simple man, really.
Mm.
I like to do my training, I like to have a few beers, I like to do my
Yeah.
business, I like to spend time with my kids. Like I like the sunshine. Like I kind of know what makes me happy in the world. So it's
Mm.
hard sometimes for me to get lenses on people who do have that identity crisis.
Mm.
I find that like perplexing that we've all this time to work out
Mm.
what we like,
Mm-hmm.
and we have most of us in the Western world have the opportunity to build your life to be able to get to that point if you make
Mm.
enough good decisions.
Mm.
It down to somebody's bad decision making process that they end up there, or do you think it's fate, or do you think it's like something? Is it a trauma, or is it a mixture of all of this, or like when you're
Yeah.
uncovering all of this, what's the things that are going on in your head?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. There's no, again, it's no, this is the reason. It's a mixture of all of those things. But when it comes to people who are in positions of leadership, they have to have something about them to get to that position, right? They have to have an inherent level of drive in order
Mm.
to become successful enough to step into the role of leadership. That can't happen for everyone because not everybody's built that way. To get to that position, a lot of people end up there through feeling like they have something to prove. And here I'll explain the difference between what I call dark energy and light energy. A lot of really, really successful people operate from a place of darkness. It's that, fuck you, I'm going to prove you wrong. Watch me. And that can come from parents, it can come from teachers who say, well, if he just applied himself a little bit more, he'd be really, really successful, right?
Right.
We internalize this, oh, watch me, I need to prove them wrong. And, there are multi-billion pound empires that have been built on that dark
Yeah,
energy.
it's that Roy Keane energy, isn't it? It's
Yeah, yeah, it's powerful. It's a really, really powerful fuel, and it's not inherently bad, but it's quite exhausting. It's not a nice place to be operating from all the time because it creates the entire lens that you view life. So, if you're in a partnership with a man or woman, you're married or whatever, that same, whoa, watch me, I'm going to prove you wrong, will be
I
there.
had a bit of that when I was younger, eh? Like
Yeah,
when I think about it, when I got into recruitment, I definitely had that, like that
yeah,
chip
yeah,
on the shoulder, and it really helped. And then I just kind of mellowed a bit.
yeah.
I, I don't know if
Mm.
that's a growth thing or if
Can be.
it might
Yeah,
be, right? Like, but
yeah.
I was definitely better at recruitment then, though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, look, maybe you proved the point because that's what it comes to. It's like
Yeah,
I've got a point to prove, and for some people, that finish line, which isn't tangible, it's just an idea. That finish line is so far out of reach that they end up burning themselves out because they're never going to get there. Because
yeah.
they say, right, if I get to this point, that's when I'll have proved my point. And then they get there and go, all right, what next? Where am I going to go now? How can I prove the point even more? And it's this like a perpetual loop of overwhelm and self-destruction because it keeps stretching the goalposts, you know?
That's intense, hey?
Yeah. 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 But then there's the other side. So that's dark energy. Light energy is different. It's coming from a place of that altruistic why. It's like for me, the mission is to work with 10,000 people indirectly over the course of 2025 through working with 100 leaders, because I
Yeah.
think that the impact of that could be absolutely enormous. That's my altruistic why, because I want to help that many people live a better quality of life, and it's ultimately psychological freedom. That's what I want to provide. I think that everybody deserves to feel psychological freedom. That's my why. It's like abundance as opposed to scarcity. Scarcity is that dark energy, never going to have enough.
Mm.
Abundance is there is always going to be enough for everyone to go around, and that's the direction that I want to go. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's a journey without any roadblocks that come up. It's got a
Yeah.
lot because living a meaningful life is really fucking hard, right? Because you care about it and you're passionate about it. But um, looping back around to your original question of what is coming up for a lot of the people that I work with, they're in that place of darkness. They're successful. they've got loads of cash a lot of the time. They might have a big team, but are they really there? Are they really present? Are they doing it for the right reasons? No, often
Wow.
they're not. Yeah, and it's because of those beliefs and ideas that are imparted into them, usually in the formative years, like 0 to 5, 6, 7 years old, where they internalize this. Well, I'm not enough, so I need to prove that I am.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. It's heavy stuff. It's heavy stuff.
Listen,
I think it's yeah, I think it's important to have these kind of conversations because it can create some really, really profound breakthroughs for people when they're aware of this stuff.
yeah, it's some people don't know how to find joy.
Yeah, ultimately, or they are finding joy, but they're finding it in the wrong places. And that's when we go back to that same conversation about the midlife crisis. It's like what I thought was joy isn't actually joy. It's joy that maybe I've borrowed based on what I thought someone else wanted me to be earlier on. It's not my
And I'm
joy.
sure we all have a bit of that, right? We're
Yeah.
all programmed to a point by our parents, like if, especially like, go get a trade or go to university and,
Oh yeah.
or
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
make up for my lack of being a sporting hero. Like
Yeah.
I got I got my two boys in like soccer academy, and I have them training jiu-jitsu 3 times a week, and I'm
Yeah.
like I'm really on it, but I'm trying not to be pressurized. But I'm
Yeah.
definitely helicoptering. Like I'm
Yeah.
definitely compensating for the younger athlete in me that probably could have done something but never really applied, or
Yeah.
was able to join it all up at the right time, or was able to get into something consistent and
Yeah.
doing that, so
Yeah.
and then yeah, it's a it's a tricky one when you try and break down yourself and why you do things, and are you
Yeah.
doing it to be altruistic, or are you doing it for yourself, are you doing it for how other people view you, or how
Right.
you've been programmed essentially.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why I think it's important when you're looking at what really drives you. This conversation about purpose and meaning and the why. It's important to have the altruistic one, but you've got to think about yourself as well. So, uh, someone asked me recently, "Why did you pick 100 people?" It's because for me to for me to live the quality of life that I want, how many hours a day I want to work, where I want to live, the things that I want to have, the kind of holiday that I want to have in a year or several holidays or whatever, how
Yeah,
much
yeah.
money I want in my account, it's 100 people. That's roughly, not exactly, but it worked out to be I need to work with 100 people in order to get that quality of life. And then by looking at that 100 people, I was able to expand that out and see, okay, well, what the impact of that be? And based on most people in a leadership position having a small family with at least 2 children, being connected to a team of anywhere between 5 to 20 people, the impact is about 10,000 people. So it then gives me the altruistic why, and it all comes back together, if that makes sense.
People can overestimate the importance of money as well, like
Yeah.
in creating joy. Um, your lifestyle, I sat down with a very successful guy once, and he said, your lifestyle between 180 or 80,000 pound a year
Mm.
or 150 isn't going to change that dramatically. Yeah, you might
Yeah.
get an extra holiday. You might, I
Mm.
know it sounds like it's a load more money, but you will have a slightly nicer car, a slightly nicer house. You may
Hmm.
end up working a bit more for that. So you might have
Mm.
less time. Uh, the real jump comes when you get to that 300 plus. Then
Hmm.
you're in two kids' private school,
Yeah.
two like proper ski holiday, proper this, like
Mm.
it all changes. And so
Yeah.
people can be like wasting their whole life going from that 80 to 150 when they're
Mm.
missing all the other joy that they could be having.
That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I set out to create a lifestyle business that spun cash, and sometimes it's good,
Hmm.
sometimes it's tough. Last year financially has been like, whew, okay, wasn't expecting that. But
Mm.
then when I,
A good
if
way
I,
or a
re-
bad way?
if I, in a bad way, if I
Ah,
review
good.
back, even though it's the worst year I've had in business,
Yeah.
I went to Australia in February.
Mm.
I went to all the cities in uh, in Andalusia. I
Mm.
spent loads of time building a martial arts gym.
Mm.
I got to spend time with my children. I got to we got an extra car. We did an investment in something else. Now, at the same time, cash is dwindling down, the safety net's not as good, work's
Mm,
tight, all of that. But my lifestyle between going from making a lot of money to not making
mm,
much, it, like my joy hasn't really been taken away. So
mm.
it's kind of
Yeah.
important to figure out where your priorities are and what you
Yeah.
can do during the week to find that piece of happiness.
Yeah. Well, honestly, mate, it sounds like you've achieved something that very few people can, and that is disconnecting self-worth from net worth.
Mm,
Yeah. So self-worth should not be dictated by your net worth, with the caveat that obviously someone who's homeless is going to have low self-worth, right?
for sure.
Obviously, yeah, we know that, but your audience aren't going to be homeless. So we can say
Yeah.
confidently that the people who are going to be listening to this podcast should not be equating that.
They usually own recruitment firms at some level or size, or they're
Yeah.
directors or managers.
Yeah.
And a lot of them will have had a hard year.
Yeah.
No, and that's the truth. Like it's been a fucking hard year.
Yeah.
But we're on the run up again now, uh,
Yeah.
and that means more events, more alcohol,
Yeah.
probably all the other stuff that comes with it. So, what
Yeah.
type of coping mechanisms can people put in place when they're like they get that itch to I want to go fucking mental now, like
Yeah.
that bit where you're like I'm gonna go blow off steam. I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
is there something that can stop that? Is there a helpline that they go, hey Dan? Fucking hit me with the tranquilizer gun right now. Like, because
Yeah.
our industry's full of lunatics.
Yeah.
Lunatics.
Yeah.
And that I go there and they're all versions of me in some
Mm,
shape or form.
mm.
And like, especially the owners, my age, bald, look like me. Like, I'm your demographic, right? Business
Yeah.
degree, not
Yeah.
too high an IQ, but just enough
Yeah.
to get to this here.
Yeah.
I see versions of my own lunacy when I walk in those rooms.
Yeah.
Like, what can you do to help us from burning everything down every now and then?
Yeah. Well, in terms of going out like drinking and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, whatever your crutch is, like
Yeah.
for me, that would be like, all right, I'm booking something in, the wheels might come off.
Yeah.
I've got a free run of it. I know the kids aren't going to be around tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Or is that an important thing? Or is that a
well, I was
good
going to
thing?
say, I think it depends on context. Like context is really important. If if there's somebody listening back to this and their coping mechanism is at the end of every month, I'm going to buy 2 crates of beer, 3 bags of cocaine, and have an absolute blowout, that's not good for anyone. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. And you know that you shouldn't be
Yeah,
doing that.
one crate and one bag.
Yeah.
Two
Yeah.
hookers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool. Context is important, So if you're doing that, then, get some help. Don't keep doing that. There's a reason why. And if it's to that degree, it will be because you're avoiding something. So instead of saying, well, you just need to find a new outlet, no, you need to identify the fuel source. What is igniting that desire to go and have that level of a blowout? There'll be something fueling that. And you can either work with a coach, you can work with a therapist, you can start doing like breath work, you can do some cold water exposure, like just do something which is going to allow you to get back into what's really going on internally within you. But on the other end of the scale, where it's someone like yourself who said that occasionally you like a blowout. If you're having a blowout once every 3 months and you're sticking to stuff like alcohol or whatever, and yeah, you probably feel shit for about a week after it. But if that's not having a seriously negative effect on your business, on the people you lead, on your family, on your friends, then it doesn't sound like it's a major problem. But I think that what is important to do is that you exercise a strong level of self-awareness and honesty to ask, is this actually a problem, first of all? And you'll know by the impact it's having and the level of consequence. And also, is this serving me? That's the ultimate question. Like, is this, I just gave my own example where I realized, okay, I'm sniffing coke on my own here and this isn't fun anymore.
yeah,
If you're doing something and it's not actually giving you anything, like there's no ROI in me doing
yeah,
this, that's when it's an issue. But for you, if you're having a blowout once every 3 months, you're having a good time, you're seeing your mates, and it's good, then it probably is giving you something. It's all about context and the individual.
And look, I think if, if I know a lot of men repress whatever's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And I've only kind of realized recently, without
Mm,
going into too much, I've probably done the same. And
mm,
maybe that there raises its ugly head in the shape
mm,
of a blowout.
yeah.
And I've kind of come to a realization what that issue was. And
Mm,
but maybe if I spoke to somebody
mm,
6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, whatever, I could have come to a head on that. But it's a hard one, you know. Like men in their
yeah.
40s, they have responsibilities, they have kids, they like it's you've a lot to juggle, you know, and you
Yeah.
probably do need somebody to speak to, eh? And
Yeah.
I probably fall into that category, that macho bullshit category of going, I can figure this out myself.
Yeah. 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 Well, the question that someone it's funny. Question someone asked me when I was going through that process, and I was like, "Yeah, I thought I could figure this out on my own." And they went, "Well, how's that worked out for you so far?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Not great, to be honest. Not great."
Yeah. Yeah.
But sometimes we just
Anyway,
need to look in the
look,
mirror.
that's us today, Dan. How can people find you? Wrap it up for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn is where I'm most active. I do have an Instagram account, but I don't really spend that much time on there. So if you just search Dan Martin on LinkedIn, whatever one that you see, I have a green background on my picture, and the position on there will be the Ripple Project. And if you wanted to go a little bit deeper into that, you can check out my website, which is thedanmartin.com.
All right. Good lad. All right. That's us today. Thanks so much, Dan. Great chat.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, mate.